Welcome back to our Cherries on Top segment where we talk all things Bournemouth, review the last week's results, any news, and see what we have on the docket coming up. So there's a lot of mixed emotions for Bournemouth last week. Very tough week, 3 games in 8 days. Great result last weekend that we talked at length about. We got a midweek game against Crystal Palace. And they came out victorious.
Yeah, it was a tight game, though. It was a really tight game, but they did win it. But like we talked about it last week, it was three games in 8 days. Yep. It's exhausting. It's very demanding. And closing out the week with Luton, that's a team that is always giving them trouble. They split most of their matches. The last 5 has been 2 wins, 2 losses, 1 tie. So I don't know. It was just a rough week. It was a hard finish. It was a hard finish. So. Not too much of a sign of anything, but you know.
I mean, there were hopes, especially after the Palace win. We talked at length about it last week. Neto and his goalkeeping. He actually had a very good game.
He did.
He kept them in it.
Maybe he heard you, man.
And then it was an absolute masterclass from Andone Iraola with his substitutions.
Oh yeah.
Bringing on Kluivert, bringing on Semenyo, and the result stuck.
Yes.
At that point, Bournemouth were only, I think, 5 points out of potential European play. Everyone on the southern coast is updating their passports, thinking, they'll be going to Prague next year.
Hey, big hopes, man. You can only hope. They're good fans. They believe in the team.
And it's a great sign for a club that's, in 125 years, never really done much. And I don't mean that condescendingly. They've always kind of been a middling club at a small ground.
Because they're peoples. They're a small town team. They're just beloved by their people, by their fans, and that's their main thing. I mean, if they eventually get to do something, it will be the dream come true for generations of people in that town. But for now, just Kluivert, seeing him play the way he plays, he's reminding me of his dad a lot, man. Like, call me an old head and all, though, but I do remember him play.
Of course.
So, it reminds me of him, and that's encouraging for them. Tyler doing well, all these other things, like you said.
Tyler was rested on the midweek game after, another game only 48 to 72
But those are signs. Those are signs.
And that was expected.
Their players improving and coming up. That shows good things. The coaching well. Sorry for the redundancy, but he's doing very good coaching right now. He's getting the best out of his players, which is all he can do, and is what it needs to be done.
So speaking of Tyler's health, Bournemouth went to Luton Kenilworth Road, actually the only stadium in the Premier League that's smaller than Bournemouth's Dean Court. And Adams was a scratch. He did not play. There was an illness called a flu, bug, whatever, going around the club. So that was what the suspected thing was. And then post-match, Iraola said it was back spasms. Not an ideal setback. You talk about hamstring injuries, which he's missed almost a full year with, and to have now something, tangentially related to that doesn't bode well. The hopes are that it's not related to anything with the hamstring.
Absolutely.
I was listening to another radio show actually this morning where they just talk about the grind that these players, whether they're American players or they're from South America, it's famous with the Brazilians. These guys, they play and play and play. They take a flight across the Atlantic, play in 2 friendlies or competitive matches for their nation, and
that's
an hour later, they're
again.
back on the plane to get back to Europe. So it's not necessarily the minutes on the field. Sometimes it's
everything else.
Sitting in a plane now for several hours, and they're getting pampered. A lot of them are on chartered planes, but it's still it's no replacement for feet on the ground.
Exactly, it doesn't change the fact that you are traveling hundreds and thousands of miles back and forth. You're doing all these extracurriculars because it's not just the plane; it's just everything. Everywhere you go, you have to do interviews. You have to do all this. That puts a stress on you and your body. And I mean, he just came back from an injury, anyways. You know what I mean? So, hopefully it's not going to be too much, but it's worrisome. It's a little worrisome. Too. At least personally for us in this area. We love him. We want him. Of course. We want to see him do well. So, our prayers. Hopefully he's good.
Right. So, without Adams, a couple other changes were in the squad. At Luton, took an early lead. And frittered it away. For the honestly, probably the first time this year I've noticed Iraiola's subs seem to be rather negative. It looked like we scored a goal and we're just going to pack it in and hope for the best. But this is a team in Luton that, one, they have goals in them. For a lower team in the league, they've got some goals in them. They have some exciting players, and they need points. They're running out of games to get those points to save themselves from relegation. Yep. In the back of their mind, I'm sure some of them, whether or not the players are, but I'm sure some of their front office is thinking about some of these other clubs with
Absolutely.
potential point deductions and things like that. But you can't rely on that. You got to settle it on the field.
You got to rely on yourself, and that is one of the things. I mean, professional soccer, they're all really good players. I mean, there are levels of it, but they're all really good players. And when they set their mind to something, anything can be accomplished.
Right.
And on top of that, like I said before, Luton and Bournemouth, it's just a rivalry. I mean, they know each other.
It's become
There
a
is no
friendly
small
rivalry
team.
in the last few years. They kind of have had similar trajectories in coming up to the Premier League. And obviously, the suspended match that we've talked about at length a couple of times now with Tom Lockyer's collapse on the field.
Yes.
Yes, it's a rivalry. Obviously, you want to be out on the field and win every game, but the fan bases seem to have kind of warmed up to one another. Both in terms of, I've heard stories that they're exchanging the costs of coach buses for the away trips and things like that. So, at the expense of some other teams, Bournemouth fans are hoping that Luton can stay up this year.
Yeah, it's a friendly rivalry. That's the best thing in sports, man.
Oh yeah,
I love it. I'm in for it. Hopefully they don't get relegated and we can see these next year too.
I'd love to see it.
Hell yeah.
So moving on, this weekend, Bournemouth hosts Man United, which used to be one of the biggest fears.
Not anymore.
In the league.
Not anymore.
With Ten Hag, they have some absolute studs on that roster, but it seems to be up and down, and nobody knows which Man United is going to show up.
That is the craziest thing because they used to be just consistency.
Yeah,
they used to, what to expect from them. Win, tie, or lose, they will give you the same. Nowadays,
nobody
it's
knows.
a roller coaster.
And in fact, for the first time in Bournemouth's long history, the return fixture, they won 3-0 at Old Trafford. So it's their first ever win at Old Trafford. Can Bournemouth do the double over Man United? The fact that that's even a thought in people's minds,
it's incredible.
Is again just shows you how far they've come under Iraola and with Bill Foley at the helm in ownership. Again, I don't want to be a broken record, but it just really, really bodes well for the future of Bournemouth. And we're hopefully along for a nice little ride with that.
Hey, like I said, we're here for it.
All right, and as not only are we here for it, but hopefully you'll all be here too as we show every Bournemouth match up on the big screen right upstairs.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back.